The idea of A Dose of Feminism is to have a digital form of show. So
Okay.
um where we talk about different subjects with feminists or women doing well in that field, such that
Mm.
the society are able to better understand the reason why feminism is important or gender equality is important, either both in women or men. Like, and it's always good for conversations like this. Is if you see successful feminists have conversations about this, they are able to relate, or even successful women generally.
Mm.
So that's why the name of the show is literally A Dose of
It
Feminism,
does.
with
Mm.
every single conversation with feminists. Please feel free to speak on how you became a feminist in the first place.
Okay. So how I became a feminist. So I grew up in with a family. So my grandmother lost her husband very young. So my grandmother raised 6 kids. And so my growing up, my mom was very young. So idea of like love, of protection, of care, of everything was tied to motherhood. I mean, there was always that sense of, oh, I lost my father and so on and so forth. And that kind of passed on to my mom, my aunts as well. And so growing up, my mom was always my mom was always everything. Like she was the first sense of, I always tell people that if I want to think of empathy, like putting myself in someone else's shoes, my mom taught me that. My mom was very she would, like, I remember when I was in secondary school and I started to like boys, my mom would trouble it, and like she would, and not in a, oh, that weird sex ed that they'll give you, that my mom would just trouble you, like, girl, you have plans for your life. When you were young, I watch kids on TV and I'll hear them speak and I would say, oh, universe, that is my daughter. My mom was like speaking into our lives that we're going to be like grand
But was she
grand
a
women.
feminist? Did she identify
My
as
mom
feminist identity?
would not call herself feminist. I mean, when I started to talk and say, like speak to her about, because one thing I do right now is that I'll get my mom on the call when I'm trying to work through maybe an article or something, and we'll discuss it. So my mom understands feminism viscerally. I mean, I've not actually asked her, but if I was to say, Mom, are you feminist? Yes, she is, because my mom was like my first feminist. My mom was pushing back. My mom was, I mean, um there are instances where my mom was socialized into, like, the socialized patriarchy. But like one thing my mom always did was push back. And my first books, she was very, very particular about the books I read. They were always like social justice themed. She found them for me, and not just like the Buchi Emechitas and all of like Nigerian feminist authors. She was looking for like Black authors as well, so that I could get. So my mom basically made me as I am. And so maybe something happened, and maybe there's something happening and I'm reacting. My mom is like, oh, no, Ololade, calm down. I'm like, don't tell me to calm down. You made me like this. So like that's the that's the running joke that we have, because I'm like, you made me like this. I was literally just by myself. You crafted me. And that's where I'm always about. And like around March, we got to speak with a professor who's writing a book, and there was something in that book about activist parenting. And I connected so much with that, because kids, you cannot educate adults out of violence, but you can educate kids. Socializing kids is so important. And the way my mom raised me, raised my sister, raised my brother, was so, she wasn't being like I am, like the way I am right. If I'm raising my kids, I'm very intentional about feministing them. But my mom was just raising us to be like, just be empathetic human beings, and to be aware and not to be ignorant about things happening around us, to be culturally aware, to be aware of your, not just your nation, but outside of your nation. So my mom made me a feminist. That's the long short
You know
of.
that I can connect 100% to what you said. Like, and I'm beginning to see that kind of trend. If you are looking for feminists and you ask them how they became a feminist, there's always something about our parents that's
Mm,
made us that way. Like, they didn't use the word feminist, like you said. They weren't trying to train us to be feminists. but they never made us feel less.
Yeah.
So at what point did you become like associate with the feminist movement or be a feminist?
Mm. So when I went to uni, I wanted to quickly mention about what you said about books. I remember vividly that when there was no light, because I used to read with a candle, and I would sleep off with the candle at my head. And that's just, that's just another thing that how Nigeria could literally like just kill a child who likes to read. And my mom made sure every night before she sleeps, she might be sleeping and she'll wake up and come and turn off the candle because she knows this girl likes to read and she'll have a candle and I have to like always protect that. But that's an aside. So when I went to uni, I'd been reading all of these things. I'd actually learned the word feminist. I would think maybe I saw it in a book or something, but I never really dwelled on it. It was just like, I never dwelled on it. And then when we got to school, and we were talking in the midst of my classmates, and then I would say things, they'll be like, feminists. And so the first time someone called me a feminist was meant to be like a slur or an insult. And I was like, and then I went to read about it, and that coincided with us reading about that coincided with me being in uni, secondary school / uni, coincided with, the popularity of Chimamanda and all our the Americanas, the half of the Yellow Sun, the Purple Hibiscus, read everything back to back, read it all over again. And then listened to her speeches and so on. And when she was, talking feminism, and I was like, this is like, what's wrong with this? I mean, she's troubling things that we saw, like raising girls to feel themselves less and so on and so forth. We were classmates in school. I mean, we didn't have that a lot because where I went, actually, I realized now that my growing up was very matrilineal because the secondary school I went to was owned by a woman. My principal was a woman, and she was radically feminist. Like she would tear down anybody who were like powerful women.
So it means if we have a feminist society, it can raise people's consciousness. Just put them in a matrilineal society. Groom children to see themselves as normal. Put them. Oh my God, this is interesting. Please go on.
In English, because I studied English in university, 300 level.
I studied English too.
We did a class on African. It was literature, and then we were studying feminisms in literature. And then there was a class we did on African feminisms. And our professor who was teaching it was a man. And he's a professor of gender studies, which I'll get back to later. And he was teaching it, and there was this, when he was teaching the African feminism, it was like, okay, African feminist, Tiwanism, in the 70s, 80s, when African women were theorizing feminism, when they were organizing and theorizing feminism, there was a lot of pushback from African men saying, feminism is not African, because, at that point in time, there had been first waves, like the suffrage movement and so on. Feminism is not African. And so a lot of the women were pushing back and saying, what do you mean feminism is not African? The peasant woman is both the producer and the reproducer. So we were feminists first when it was white people that came to and disrupted the fact that women worked. White women had to fight for the right to work. African women were already working. If anything, they now started taxing African women that led to the revolt. So what do you mean that we were not feminists in Africa first? If anything, we were even pushing back against the fact that, okay, you will say, in African society, women were visible, women had some power, women had this, that. But you were still using biology to restrict us. You would say, a woman is menstruating, you cannot enter somewhere. A woman is giving birth, you cannot do this. You were still, if a woman can only be a regent, you were still leading women, you were still allowing women to lead only by proxy. You weren't exactly leading. They were using, they were trying to go doing your mole. So, so there was that pushback. And so they were like, you know what, Shebi, you are saying feminism is not African, don't worry. We will theorize, but we will not call it feminism. Because one, we want to shut out all of those narratives, or we are imitating white women. So they were creating feminism, but they were calling it other names. So they were calling it Tiwanism. They were calling it African womanism. They were calling it nego feminism. They were calling it snail feminism. They were calling it I'm trying to say modernism, And so that was where I learned about it. And I was like, what? There's a whole ecosystem of like what is happening? Where is this? Like, why can't we see? Why don't we hear it? I mean, in the US, for instance, when you are in a community of Black women, they are making mentions to Audre Lorde taught us this, Alice Walker taught us this. They are mentioning the names of these foremothers. We don't do that. Nobody mentions Molara Gudikwe. Nobody mentions Katrina Tolu. You know, we're not mentioning, we are not saying them like, oh, as this is that, except you are in an academic setting or you are in a setting of women who read. And it's
Exactly.
like, what is happening? And despite the fact that the professor was teaching it was still, because he would mention Africa, Stewanism, social transformation, including women. It says that the problems against African women is race, international economic order, class, demand, and internalized traditional structures, internalized misogyny. And then after he reads it, he will say, by the way, this woman, she wanted to come to our department. Ale Kuroni, that very feminist in me. Even as very feminist in me, feminist, Ale Kuroni is a professor of gender studies. And he was teaching feminism. He will read it and give a commentary. So he was teaching it in this very
misogynistic point of view.
And so for a lot of people in my class, that education ended there. Me, hell no. I am not now. I'm Kendi's daughter. It did not end there. And so I started to like go find resources on it. I started to read about them. And then coincidentally, in my final year, when we were choosing final year projects, Beyonce released Lemonade. Now, when you listen to Lemonade kind of made Black feminism accessible, because it was basically saying the most disrespected person in America is a Black woman, the most unprotected person is a Black woman. And she was talking about, you know, all of the things that Black women face as not just Black people, but also Black people who are women. And, you know, and so that was like my first actual education into Black feminism. But of course, it did not stop there. And I know there was a lot of pushback from like scholars like Bell Hooks, who were like, Beyonce is a terrorist.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Beyonce is a terrorist because the idea of Black feminism was for women to find love. Like the idea of Black feminism was a radical politics of love. And what liberates you is you breaking away from the systems and loving yourself so radically that nothing can, you know, shake you out of it. But like Beyonce's, I mean, I love Beyonce, but like it ended in this, I am reaching out to my man to heal him, you know, we are coming back together. So like she kind of wrote it out of the very essence of Black feminism. But that was actually a lot of people's first introduction into what Black feminism was, who were not, you know, US African Americans. And so I started to read, I started to read into what like that was. I came across intersectionality. I came across, you know, all of these other Black feminists too, who were theorizing feminisms with other names instead of feminism, calling it womanism, you know, who were calling it like Alice Walker's womanism. And I was seeing a lot of connections between like the Molara Ogudikpe or the Amata Aidu and this Black feminists, because they were speaking to each other. Even though Black feminists didn't really understand structural adjustment programs, how the international economic order was affecting African women, and you could see that that was where they were splitting, because even though they were saying Black feminisms, they were saying Black feminisms in a way that was still othering African women. So African women had to say, you know what, don't speak for us. We would theorize ourselves, you know. But there were still a lot of connections.
What you said makes so much sense. What you said makes so much sense when you're talking about Black feminism, especially the part where you said people started theorizing. Because one of the reasons why this program is called Naija Feminists is because it is Nigeria and it is Naija Feminists. Because I begin to see a problem, like you also mentioned, when they say Black feminists, they begin to say bell hooks. Right? Our mothers were feminists. They did not use feminism. I remember reading Joys of Motherhood while on my bunk bed in the secondary school. That was where I knew there was a problem. I did not call herself a feminist. I did not read anywhere feminist. But these women are feminists. So, and Black American feminism is also shaped by race. We Nigerian feminism is not necessarily shaped by race. It's shaped by tribal cultures. So when we need to use just what Black feminism, African feminism, at the end of the day, it's still ordering some people. So we have Nigerian feminism. Of course, it goes under Black feminism. Of course, it goes under Western feminism. But at the end of the day, feminism is feminism. And I think one of the reasons why they kept associating feminism with Western is because, like you said, these people have books on it. They have theories on it. If you look at most of the pages, it's Western pages, and the faces that they put there are Western women. And that's one of the reasons why we are doing Naija feminist media. It is Black women that be talking, Nigerian women that be talking, because that way we begin to associate it back to us, our own original experience, what made us a feminist, how we became a feminist. The word feminist was not used for us, but our parents literally grouped us to be feminist. So please, what is even the next question? I did not remember, but let's continue because
I
there's
think
no
you
question here.
mentioned like the PhD and
Yeah, exactly, PhD.
something about um
So how you
why
became,
Nigeria and Africa. Okay.
what's moved you, as a child, you were already groomed to be feminist. And then in school, the word feminist was used to you, and Chimamanda and Beyonce also used the word feminist. So you begin to tie to that movement. Then you began to see a problem. But when I made you say, I will carry this matter on my head, I will do PhD in women and sexuality. That is where we are going now.
Okay, so like I said, my undergrad project was on the representation of race and gender politics in Beyonce's Lemonade. So I was already like talking, and one thing I also did was, apart from analyzing the album through Black feminism and intersectionality, I was analyzing it through African feminism. So I analyzed it through modernism and through Stiwanism. So when I finished, and at that point in time, I was already reading a lot about like, the lives, the organizing of these African women of Molara Ogudipe. I learned about how they established women in Nigeria. Women in Nigeria was Nigeria's, I think, biggest feminist national top-bottom organizing, where there were a lot of women. There were Bilikisu Yusuf. There was so many, and they had organized to have like this top bottom. I mean, we are kind of lost that. I mean, we have organizing, we have grassroots organizing, but we don't have that top bottom that everywhere there is a state that we, meet and so on and so forth. So back then, these women had some proximity to like make, especially around the time when there was a lot of movement for post-coloniality and so on and so forth. So they had proximity to people that were thinking radically about, all of these things. And I read a book about an interview where a woman said that at that point in time, they decided to, because they were at the opinion that the liberation of women was also tied to the liberation of Nigeria and the liberation of Africa as a whole. Yeah. And so men were brought in to kind of listen on what like Win was doing. But this men came in and decided that they were going to teach the women how to do feminism. Like and now Win is I forget the name of the woman, but I read the interview. She did the interview with Olutimi Adigbeye. I forget her name now. And so she said Win now is just, it's not what it used to be. It's not making the kind of powerful statements it used to make. I mean, I think Nigerian Feminist Forum has kind of filled in, but it's still like so isolated from like young feminists,
Yeah.
And so reading that history, I was like, and the reason why you can even study gender studies or women's studies in Nigerian universities was because of the work of the women of WIN, who were pushing for Nigerian institutions to theorize gender.
I don't even think there's a lot, because they did not teach me feminism in my secondary school or university.
So you will find them in like English departments and so on. But that the first gender studies department they established was in University of Ibadan, in the Institute of African Studies. And so I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I want to go study gender studies masters in UI, because my BA was also in UI. And the reason why I wanted to go was that Bolanle Awe is also like a really powerful Nigerian feminist that we don't mention her name outside of academic circle. And Molara Ogudipe were some of the founding mothers of this place. And so I was like, I wanted to go there. So maybe if they are doing something, I could see them. I could tell them, you inspired me. I read your story. Oh my God, like you're so amazing, and so on and so forth. Guess what happened? I resumed gender studies in, so I served from June to July, and then I resumed in August, or I resumed late July. Molara Ogudipe died like 2 months later.
Oh my
I was
God.
like, I was so sad
Oh
I
my
was,
gosh.
oh, and funny enough, I had been making contact with somebody who knew her, and I was like, can I get an email so that I could like send her an email so that she knows that she touched somebody who is like in this generation,
Yeah.
but that's sad, but but anyways, I did my master's in African studies and gender studies, and that was also amazing. There's this organization that was also formed by these women called Women's Research and Documentation Center, because they knew that if you don't document women, these
You
stories,
erase
this
them.
these stories will be erased. And so WADOC has always did a lot of grassroots academic bridging. So they did a lot of, there was the girls forum where they would bring girls from school to talk to them, sex ed, to talk to them about feminism, to talk to them about how they shouldn't internalize all of the fields of society. We had I think they also started boys forum because they realized that, they needed to bring in all of these masculinity rights people to
Yeah.
talk to them about healthy masculinity. Then we used to do this program also with rural women where we bring them in. I did a thread one time when I was saying about how they brought them in to talk about how do in your society, in your spaces and your society, how do you combat sexual violence? And they were
Yeah.
talking about like all these Yoruba indigenous approaches to ending sexual violence. And
Balance.
so that was really, WADOC was like such an education. And it was when I was in my master's, I started to like, from the inspiration I had with WADOC about how to bridge academia and grassroots work, I started to work with this organization called Scream Initiative. That was
Hmm.
a movement, that was a organization to end rape. So there was a lot of education, like accessible education, a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of walking, marching. And at that point in time also, I got in Nigerian Women's Trust Fund. They are this organization that is kind of representing women politically at the national level, and they realized that young women are not, we don't have young women amongst us. There's a gap.
Mhm. There's a guy.
How do we
Yeah.
bridge in
Bridge the gap.
like bring young women who are not just speaking to gender, speaking to women's issues, but also speaking about it from a political education point of view? And so they created Young Women in Politics Forum. So my friend was the Ibado liaison. I mean, what's the name they call them? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she brought me into the fold. And so we were doing that together, bringing other women. So like I was doing work with Scream, I was doing work with WADOC, I was doing my master's, I was doing work with Young Women in Politics Forum. So that's
So,
how.
I don't want to lose the point from something that is very important that you said.
Hmm,
Like, there is always a gap, and Nigerian women look to fill in. So there's a political gap, they are trying to fill it in. There's an
yeah,
academic gap, they are trying to fill it in. For instance, I noticed there's a gap in media, in feminist media narrative, and I'm trying to fill it in.
hmm,
That shows that there's a whole way that we can build around feminism. In your sector, if there's a gap in medical sector, you can use your power or your career or your understanding as a woman to try and fill it in. So this is just
yeah,
very important that even if anybody is watching and you're thinking, how can you fill in the gap? There is so many gaps that you can fill, either academic one, political gap, economic one, there's medical misogyny. If you're a medical doctor, there's a way you can fill it. You can literally establish an hospital that will be
yeah.
doing all the things that they are not allowing women to do.
Yeah,
So
and I
very
think
good,
there are some
please.
hospitals now that they created that is basically like women-centered hospitals. Yeah, I see
Yeah,
that.
so I
Oh,
think we are
I'm
going to
thinking of
probably
what
round
doctor.
up because I think our time is already going, and this is like a whole lot of interesting conversations. I don't know, maybe we'll have to do part two. So yeah, there's a lot
Let
on
me
here.
let me quickly answer the question. So based on this background, it was just natural for me to go do a PhD in women's studies. So I mean, I think I've given you a lot of background already because I
And it's
was,
very
and
interesting.
one thing that I wanted to do especially was like talk about like the history. During NSAS, a lot of people were talking about like a lot of international media were writing the feminist coalition as if they were like the first, like, oh, Nigerian feminism. And I was
First,
like, what? There's a
it is
history to this.
not.
What are you talking about? And that
In
was like
fact,
basically the drive that these women are doing amazing work, but they are they are preceding
criticism.
their
Yeah,
predecessors. They are drawing from the energies and the work of their predecessors who did this also. And so what they're fighting for now is like a
build up.
struggle in okay. So yeah, I already spoke about how I eventually decided to do a PhD. So it was just natural to see there was a lot of gaps. There were a lot of people talking about, I mean, what the Feminist Coalition did was very closely similar to the organizing of Funmilayo Ransome Kuti. I mean, Find Funmilayo Ransome Kuti and the women of the Abeokuta Women Union were the Eniola Soyinkas and so on were speaking to taxation, but they were also protesting against local police violence. And how did they do that? Initially, they were a ladies' club, and they were about, banding together as ladies of high repute, upwardly mobile ladies, just gathering together on how to help people. Same way Feminist Coalition started as Wine and Wine, where they would gather together and drink wine and wine. And then eventually they realized there was a gap. They weren't really bridging. And so they decided, let's bridge with market women and don't let us call ourselves ladies, because ladies are the colonial, tone to it about ladies being like proper and so on. Let's call ourselves Abeokuta Women's Union. And FEMCO also moved from like that radical care, let's enjoy, to a movement that, became everybody's FEMCO, so yeah, you could see those connections. I mean, I'm sure they weren't like, they didn't have a playbook and they were doing one by one, but it's just how
it just connects
across generations people are mirroring each other unconsciously.
So you mentioned something very important, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti. So we are feminists, so we get. But for the essence of women that are just women, and Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, they don't really speak to her in the feminist sense. What exactly are the things she has done? How she became a feminist? Like, that feminist word is just a term. It is what women are doing, and the set of women are doing is what we then call feminist. It's because Nigerian men or men want to demonize that feminist word is why we are saying we are feminist. So can you just talk a bit about what Funmilayo Ransome Kuti did?
So a lot of people read Funmilayo Ransome Kuti as force woman to drive a car, period. But Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was one of the women who, apart from the anti-colonial struggles that she did, she was one of when they founded Nigeria's first political party, the National Council of Cameroon, of Nigeria and Cameroons. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was the only woman in that fold. And at that point in time, there's this notion that, fine, even though our pre-colonial African societies, there was still the problem of using biology to restrict women, but women had voice, women had spaces, women were visible. And so there was that notion of, okay, when we send the colonizer away, we'll go back to our Asha. The colonizer was the one who came, and because of his own Victorian patriarchy, he gave the African man apical privilege over African women. And so he uprooted structures that existed, shut women out, and put the man at the top. And so that's the problem with a lot of, apart from Nigeria, a lot of African societies today, because we are dealing with societies that were under toes of matrilineal, structures, but then you put a patriarchy on it, and that's why we have problems that can never be resolved. And so when they formed this movement, what these men wanted was, like, they wanted to start doing colonialism light. Like, they wanted the colonizer away, but they wanted to replace themselves in the position of the colonizer. So they wanted Funmilayo to now be doing gathering women. The politics that Nigerian women in public office do now, that our Minister of Women Affairs, the only our job is to go and be sharing POS and be saying, yeah, vote for our father, vote for him. That's what they wanted Funmilayo to do. And she was like, me. Hey, in fact, like, I just imagine that's what she would have done,
Yeah.
And she was like, me, I should come and be doing cheerleader politics for you. And so
exactly,
she left. I mean, there was a lot
politics.
of tension. The W had transformed into a national organization at that point in time. And so there was a lot of tension with women who didn't agree with Funmilayo Ransome Kuti. But Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was very insistent that I wasn't going to turn myself into your cheerleader. And so she left and went to create a political party. That was the Commoners People's Party. And that's why I'm also very big on feminism for the 99%. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti embodied that it wasn't just me. It was commoners people. We needed to bridge the same way we bridge with the market women, and we realized we needed to get off our idols. A lot of us talk about feminism in Nigeria from a gender lens without exactly speaking to class. Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti understood that, you know, without exactly speaking to religion. She understood that. She bridged the differences between religion, between language, between class and gender, and
And
decided
wouldn't that be what
we have the range.
intersectionality means? Sorry to cut you short. Wouldn't that be what
Yes,
intersectionality means? Like all of these very segments,
yes,
gender, class, and the likes. Sorry, please continue.
yes. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm always saying, that even though our mothers didn't, and that's what I was saying before, that about the connection between Black feminism and African feminisms, and, you know, they were speaking to each other, even though they weren't using the exact same term. What Kimberly Crenshaw called intersectionality is something that had always existed in African women's, like, organizing. It has always, just read, just watch what Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti did. That is intersectionality in practice. This is not theory. It is in practice. That how do we get off and bridge? You know, and that's why I'm always about, if we resolve there's this there was this hashtag one time, being female in Nigeria. That was, I think, in 2015.
Yeah.
And what you notice about that hashtag, I mean, it was great about a lot of women, a lot of middle-class women in Lagos and Abuja talking about their experience, that, oh, be female in Nigeria means, even though I'm the head, my gatesman will still be saying, Madam, oh, me, I don't need to let women talk to me anyhow. But that still erased, like, the experience of the girl on the street who is hawking, or the house girl. She's not only experiencing gender equality, she's also experiencing class equality, because a lot of madams will say, me, I cannot be doing care work because their husband thinks care work is a woman's work. And so they will say, me, I cannot do care work. I'm going to pay somebody to do it.
Thank you for
Now, you
mentioning
pay
this.
somebody to do it, you go and rip a child out of their mother's hands. I mean, even if the mother willingly sold the child to you, because that's slavery, you know, the
Yeah,
mother willingly
child labor.
there is no care work yeah.
I said child labor. Yes,
Okay, there's no
continue.
care work child labor. There's no care work that girl can do that can amount to the amount of money you are paying her. And then you are liberated in that you don't have to do care work, but that girl is getting doubly oppressed. You know, the girl hawking on the streets is not just a victim of gender, she's also a victim of the fact that her parents' poverty, because of, you know, the state structures, is trickling down, is denying her education, is living out on the streets, vulnerable to violence, vulnerable to cars eating her. You know, a northern Nigerian girl who cannot go to school is not just a victim of gender violence, but also a victim of traditional structures and religion. So that's why no matter how much gender policy, gender equality bills we sign in Nigeria, if we don't have policies and briefs that speak to religious-based discrimination on women and traditional-based discrimination on women, there will always be a gap. Because these women are not only experiencing gender inequality, they're also experiencing, and that's why Molara Ogudipe, when she was saying, she said the African woman has 6 mountains. One, her race, the fact that she is of the Black race in this world where white men created an artificial category of race to oppress those who are darker skinned. She said 2, colonialism and neocolonialism, because that's disrupted our culture. She said 3, traditional structures. And that traditional structures includes all forms of traditional forms of oppression, like labor structures and so on. She said she said our backwardness as people of Africa is also denying a lot of young women opportunities, because somebody who is born in Canada is already 100 miles ahead of you when you're born in Nigeria. And she said, number 6, it's a woman's internalization of her own oppression, like internalized patriarchy, the pygmies, you know, what they internalize. And so when she was speaking to this, she was speaking to that, you cannot take out the man out of the equation, all of these things will still be troubling women. And so when you speak about about women, you have to be holistic. And Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti understood that. And that was very intentional about when she said a commoners people's party, because she was trying to bridge, you know. And so
just to ask a question, from how I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing this from your perspective, but wouldn't we then say we have gender inequality because we have a man and woman dynamic? which is like a superiority complex. But even in all of this, there are layers, which is why
Yes.
intersectionality is very important, because no matter how rich you are as a woman, you would still face gender inequality. But it
Yes.
cannot be compared to a lady that is born in poverty.
Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
that I may be privileged that I don't have to face that. I'm still oppressed, but my oppression cannot be mentioned because
Compared
there
to,
are
yeah, so many
different
layers.
layers to it. At the end of the day, it all still come under gender inequality, but we will not have a different form of intersectionality because it will be harder to break one without breaking the other.
The
If you
other.
are poor, it's even easier for men to take advantage of you, because when you're poor and a man is bringing you down to Lagos, is Lagos not a better life?
Mm-hmm.
But then
Yeah.
what happens when you don't have a job? He insists you keep just taking care of the child. You are stuck.
Mm.
And then now he says you're no longer fine. And he starts cheating on you. And he starts bringing out knife to kill you.
Mm.
Where do you want to go? Okay, how do I,
Yeah.
as an individual, help her? We need structures. We need systems.
Benny.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
You know,
so
I
I
was
just wanted to put that example to break out down what you said.
Yeah, when you were saying, I was just writing down as you were saying. I was like, one, allocation in the village. Two, traditional structures that are enabling misogyny, where somebody can come and say, I want to marry your 16-year-old, and the father said, okay, Magbelo. Poverty, then taking her to Lagos, isolation.
Isolation.
Like, then
And
the
now she's
man.
married again. Now she has a child again. We are done. We are
It's
finished.
like the man, poverty, motherhood, and the motherhood for her is not like liberation, it's shackles, like
Exactly.
chains.
Because where will
Like
you go?
underprivileged, like domestic violence, like it's just so much going on. It's just, somebody was saying, so I saw a tweet and somebody said that there's an housewife mentality pandemic going on right now. And a lot of people see it from, oh, women are just lazy, that's why they want to be housewives. But the streets are hard. There's a problem. There's an economic problem. And for a
Economic
lot of
problem.
women, they see that, oh, there's a lot of problem happening. I'm just gonna like
That's the
wait.
solution.
Yeah, the solution to a lot of women's poverty has always been you marry and then that's it. And they marry and they get into a myriad of problems where they are facing domestic violence situations, they are facing multiple, because you think that marriage is going to solve your issue, but it's compounding your poverty.
Your issue.
Because now you're not only responsible for yourself, you're responsible for so much, like another set of people, and poor people give birth the most. And it's just like a problem that, it just breaks my heart because we have all of these public offices that, there is still, I always say Nigeria needs affirmative action in terms of gender. Put the women there, fine. We have women like our minister, yes.
Yeah.
But put women there. By the
put
time,
feminists that understand the problem.
Yes.
That can see it, that can connect the dots.
That can connect it, because there is no top to bottom. Look at how we are talking about femicide happening right now. There is no top to bottom structure for femicide.
Exactly.
I was interacting with Adesua, the lady who does Untold Stories with Adesua, and she was saying she would ask Barrister Uju Kennedy that, what are you doing about this? But the last empowerment program she did was to share POS. How can there be a femicide epidemic and we have a Minister of Women Affairs who is not speaking, who is not on Twitter listening, who is not on spaces? Even if it's not her, there should be a liaison that, oh, this is my mouthpiece. Because in Nigeria, the creation of First Ladies' offices and the creation of ministries was to give that illusion of gender equality. And it started
illusion, that word, illusion.
Yeah, it started around Miriam Babangida's, when Miriam Babangida was First Lady. There was a lot of, and around that time, Nigeria was still under military dictatorship. And so the condition of the IMF and the World Bank giving Nigeria and other African countries loans was that you have to have gender equality, structural adjustments. You have to show this. And so they were like, how do we give women something without giving women something? Have you forgotten that there's already Madam has interest? People are already respecting Madam. Madam is already doing things. The wives of the head of states were already organizing and doing all of this empowerment outreach. And make it a office, institutionalize it. And that's where the office of the First Lady became the pseudo-powerful, like most powerful woman's office in Nigeria.
And that makes no sense.
You know, and then he started to like everywhere across the states. And that's why Buhari administration removing that office because of patients was so problematic. Because what do you want to tell me that, okay, fine, the office might not be doing, like it might be a performative, like, but they were still doing something. And you removed it because one first lady happened to be loud. And happened to be visible.
And yeah, exactly.
Like that was the problem with patients, because she was too visible and she was talking too much. And then you reduce it to wife of governor, so that wife of president, so that they don't feel like they have too much power. And then Aisha showed them Pepe. Go on.
I like how you just example and the knowledge you have of these things, because exactly when people say African feminism or Western feminism or we are copying Western feminism, do you think we don't have our problem? We have our problems. The problems that are original to us. And we are trying to solve the problem that is original to us. That is what feminism is. That is what Nigerian feminism is. It's not as if we saw they were beating one person in America. And so we need to now say we want to be like, we have original problems in which those original problems led to the original creation of structures.
Yes.
And for you to then want to say we are copying African, are you saying that we are dumb? Like men used to beat women in America. So we Nigerian women, we used to take men beating us in America. So by speaking up and say don't beat us, we are copying people. Like we don't know, has there had been a time we've never spoken for our rights? This is why when you are speaking to what Funmilayo Kuti is doing, for you to understand that they are solving original problems due to the problem they face in Nigeria. It's not a difficult concept. Because one of the things we want to do with this show is to break down the concept. It is not an idealistic concept. It is not a different concept. It is the reality of women and girls. The reality of women and girls in Nigeria shapes the reality of women and girls speaking up.
Yes.
Simple as anything.
Yes. And that's why I'm also very big right now on a lot of young feminists, a lot of us, our energy is directed to solving male violence. But because our energy is so directed to solving male violence, we are ignoring politics. Because we just don't have the energy for it. We don't have the range. We have this, and when I say we don't have the range, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. It's just that there is so much work to be done that we don't have the energy. We don't have the funds. We don't have the recognition to do all of these things.
And we don't have enough women that's connected the problem yet.
Yeah. And because of that, men are making a mess of politics. The women that are there are just doing they're just doing masculine politics. They're just repeating stomach infrastructure.
Let me give you an example. I joined YPP, Youth Party, that we need to be in politics. And then maybe because of how vocal I was, the chairman in charge was like really wants to put me there just to push me. So there was time for us to do primary. The men were sitting in front and I went to sit in front too. I did not even sit in front because the men were there, but I was early, I sat in front. And the women were at the back. And they were tapping me and saying, Auntie, come to the back. And I was like, why will I come to the back? Because the front is meant for me. In political party. You now said, they've not told us to sit in front yet. In political parties, Nigeria not for all of us. You are in a political party and you are sitting at the back, waiting for the men to tell you to come to the front in a political party. That is why we need to first and foremost raise feminist social consciousness. Because even when women are in a political party, they don't know why they are there. Why are you in a political party and you are waiting for men? When I sat down there, the men were not trying to tell me to leave and say, hey, madam, we call you, madam, we call you. You're an ESCO, I'm an ESCO. Nigeria is for all of us. And then I started to shout, is it because I'm a woman you want me to live here? And no, it's not because of that. I was like, you guys, we don't know who is here with you. We don't know who is in this party with you. And then I sat out there. And then we did what we wanted to do. And then I realized that in the political party, they're always fighting about money that they ate and money that they did not eat. And it's men that are always fighting about the money they are eating or not eating. But that just speaks to the problem of, even when women are in political parties, they are dormant. They are using them to do, when we want to cook rice, we'll call you. And women too are sitting there. Like, before the men told me to leave, the women themselves opened their mouth and say leave. I said, why? Because men have not called us.
You know, this just reminded me of something you said. Somebody made a tweet that even in office settings, men expect women to do the housework in the office. And that's the same thing that in political parties, they expect women to do. When I joined Young Women in Politics Forum, and I actually got into, because we young women in politics forum, we're realizing that if we don't liaise with parties, then what we are doing is just in a vacuum. So at that point in time, APC was still a sensible opposition. So we were aligned with the APC eventually, because we're like, how do we make a change? Let's align and let's try to. And it was from there, watching this thing, I was like, this was 2018 or 19, and I was like, political cheerleaders. Women are political cheerleaders. Like, we're just like, we
That
wear
is the word.
ashoebi and
That is the
dance.
perfect word.
Hey,
That is the perfect word for it.
and that is it. I have a friend who, she was a student activist, and she basically bullied the late Governor Ajimobi to give her an appointment. Like, she will go to there, whenever they are doing something, she will go and stand there. Governor Ajimobi, why is there no woman in your administration? She was like, that was she would basically go there and she bullied until the man was like, oh boy, like, and I feel like more women should do that. Like, echo them, like,
but I think when we begin to build social consciousness in women, because all of these problems you said, they are real. And I think one of the things why women shy away from feminism is what they think is one Western problem somewhere.
Yes.
Or one Western distance somewhere. African feminism is original to Africa. African feminism that is happening in Black people, like you said, bell hooks and the likes, it's also different from Nigerian feminism.
Yeah.
Because Nigerian feminism problem is typical, and feminism have always existed. If you are solving your problem as a woman and connecting the dots and seeing that there's a problem somewhere, you will be able to make effective change.
You know, this is what you're saying is reminding me of something. And I think this was what Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti was warning against. When she saw the way NCNC was trying to use women as just to use women for numbers and not to make any change. Because the goal was to have a national structure where women's issues was integral to the development of the state. But NCNC had other plans, and that's why she left. But there's only so much you can do when you isolate yourself. And I think one thing that women right now in public office do is that they have that class consciousness. So they will say, we are helping poor people. But what they do, they are not helping poor people with the intent of helping poor women. They are just weaponizing poor as a tool to just use it to steal money and give all this token, take bag of rice, take Congo of rice. And so they are using this, they are weaponizing this rhetoric of class and poor people and commoners, but they are not making any structural change. And that's where the problem comes from. And it's now a thing of rich women giving poor people toro kobo.
Yeah.
And that's why not having a top to bottom structure of feminist consciousness in the way that our Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti and our Molara Ogundipe envisioned, that was the plan they had for us. They wanted us to be free. They were doing this work to make feminist women's issues integral to the state. Exactly. But people messed it up. And that's why I will call out the Uju Kennedys, I will call out the Zianis as much as I call out the men, because they are complicit. They are complicit in this problem we have today.
But what about the women that were brought up in the village? If they were brought up in the village, you know that, like you said, there's already a traditional and cultural problem. They will first groom her first. And then poverty is on top of it. And then they tell her that marrying is the solution, and then she marries. And they tell her that Lagos is the land of opportunities, and she comes to Lagos and marries. And then they say that if your husband says you should give birth, even if she was brought up in a rich home, as long as there's that gender dynamics there, as long as she has not connected that there's a problem in men thinking they are superior, even if they make her president, she cannot make any meaningful change, because she has not yet understood,
internalized.
They've not connected the dots yet, that there's a problem. Like when you connect the dots, feminism is very easy, whether you read or not, because it's reality. Once you connect the dot that there's a problem, even if you're a doctor, you know how men are doctors and they're using their profession as a doctor to be perpetuating misogyny. If you're a feminist, even if you're a doctor, it will be easy for you to connect the dots and say, I want to build structure for it. If you're in political office, I feel like For women to say they're sitting at the back and waiting for men to call them, it's because they've not connected the dots on what feminism is.
Yes. And
Or
that's
why we
why
need to
when
be
you
a
go to
feminist.
when I started my first class in gender studies in Institute of African Studies, the first thing that they said when we got to our first class was that this is a class of consciousness raising. And that's what feminism does. It raises your consciousness, things that you are not even aware of. You're like, more micro, actually, I'm enabling misogyny in micro things, like things that you don't even realize. And I think another thing, I know we are running out of time, but one thing I would also wanted to add is that a lot of us need to, the way our mothers, when they are speaking to their feminism, they will say, I am a Yoruba woman, I am disabled, and so I am a Yoruba disabled feminist. Like, I want us to start saying our identities as they frame our feminism, because that is the only way we can all have this, we can recognize our differences and then bridge. Because I see a lot of the times, what causes a lot of fights amongst us is that we don't understand our differences. We are speaking in a uniform language without speaking to our specific experiences. And that's what feminism does. It's consciousness raising of acknowledging your individual experiences and bridging into the collective. And I think that's what a lot of Black feminists, if you encounter a Black feminist, they will say, I am a Black, lesbian, disabled woman. And they will frame their feminism like that. And I think we should start doing that, saying our location, saying I am a Nigerian, Igbo, poor, like spell it out so people would know, and we'll see the need to bridge. So I think that is where from that, and also I know it's hard, but like I'm realizing now that electoral politics, if we do not have the structure, if we don't have somebody in there speaking and helping us to dismantle these structures, we are only going to keep speaking without making any changes. And I think
system in place,
maybe we
structural
should have like a campaign that every other Monday, everybody will tag Barrister Uju and say, Barrister Uju, what are you doing? Barrister Uju, like maybe by the time she hears so more, like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is flooded with her, maybe she would bridge. Because how are you Minister of Women Affairs and you're not speaking to the grassroots organizers? You are not bridging. You are doing all of this upwardly mobile women politics of empowerment. That is not structural change, especially in this moment in time. You need to listen. You need to listen to young people. There's a gap. So, yeah.
You said a lot. Is there any other final thing you want to say as it relates to feminism, African feminism, Nigerian feminism, what we all need to do, how we all need to come together? I know your final notes like makes so much sense already, but is there any other thing that I haven't asked you, or any other thing you had no opportunity to say that you'd like to give as a final word?
Yeah, the final thing I wanted to say is that apart from all of these issues that we are encountering with politics, with like male violence, with class issues, and so on and so forth, there are new things that are happening to us, that we are still dealing with things that our mothers were dealing with. And now, in this moment in time, we are dealing with new, like if there's one thing we are good at,
problems.
We know how to make injustice. We will find it out of a void. Now is the issue of surveillance. There's this group we follow, GST. They are talking about how Nigerian politicians are taking criminal tracking technologies and using it to spy on their mistresses and using it to spy on their political enemies. If you notice, there was a nuance about what Femco was saying in their blog, Medium blog post, where they said they will change their locations, but they will still find them. Our politicians the police have surveillance technologies, and they are using it to go after opposition. They are using it to detain journalists and take their phones and use it to de-encrypt their phones and find out their sources and so on. They are using digital, like now we are in a digitally enabled society. Everybody is happy about progress, but they are using these digital platforms that we are celebrating about connection and progress. They are using it to surveil us. And so they are creating a whole form of oppression that is so scary. Because how can you even organize when you are scared of surveillance?
And there's so many problems. And if we don't solve this problem, do you know the saddest part? We will only keep doing hashtags.
Yeah.
It will never be solved. If we help our lives, we must raise our social consciousness. We must deconstruct, like you said it. We must build Nigerian feminism as it is around our lives. Like you said, you should identify yourself. My name is Cynthia Bakari and I'm a Yoruba girl.
Yes.
This is the problem I'm facing.
Yes.
And if we all are not free, Because that's why I don't understand. And that's why I appreciate you so much for coming on this show. Because even though our ideologies are not exactly the same, there are so many problems that we have in connection that we can talk about. So I don't understand where feminists divide. We already have small sections of feminists. Now divide again and divide again because some aspects of your ideologies don't match. We are
Because you
doing
don't understand
ourselves.
each other's languages.
We have too many problems in common.
And it
So
is in
not
our
to
difference
divide
that our
ourselves.
liberation lies. Like it's our difference that would make us, that would make us free.
Because
You know?
if you are doing your own feminism, and I say I don't align with this your type of ideology, I will do my own feminism. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we meet in front and connect. Women's
Yes.
liberation. Because if I'm not free, you are not free.
Benny.
And one of the ways if we are not free, you are not free is if men are killing women. For instance, the 15-year-old story Naija Feminists did, where the 15-year-old boy entered the home of a 14-year-old girl and utter. Do you know the ripple effect of fear it will be in the mind of other women that can I sleep well at night?
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why everybody must get on the board and train on feminism.
Yeah.
Women are so afraid to say I'm a feminist. The first thing say I'm not like that too. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you speak up for your rights. Absolutely nothing. I'm all feminist. So thank you so much I have learned a lot by you just coming. And one of the reasons why I was so particular and spoke about your PhD is because I also want women to know that you can reach the greatest high you can. I've also always said I wanted to do my PhD since like 3 years ago. But somehow this year, I just kept meeting women with PhD and people with PhD, and I'm like, oh, okay. It is time you must do it. And that's the essence of bringing women on this show. If you see women like you and what they have accomplished and the knowledge that they've mastered, at least 2 things supposed to enter. That is why I said we should see our faces. This is us. This is us. When you see us, you are a woman like us. At least 1 or 2 things. So there is not enough feminist examples out there, like women that are unapologetic feminists and are
Yes.
doing well and they can speak. They are not. And one way we will change the narrative if we women show ourselves, we feminists are out and loud about ourselves, about our and so thank you so much for at
You're
least
welcome.
accommodating,
Thank you for
coming to the
having me.
show. And it's very interesting. I hope we'll be able to have more and more meaningful conversations towards at the end of the day, like you said, building our liberation.